Zafira Kingsley, 29, never imagined her hard-earned Lexus would end up wrapped around a tree while her sister Amber posted selfies from the wreckage. "You'll forgive me." "You always do," Amber smirked, tossing her perfectly highlighted hair. "Mom and Dad will make sure of it." 2 months later, as Amber stood sobbing in the courthouse parking lot, abandoned by our parents for the first time in her life, I realized some family ties are meant to be severed. Before I dive into this story that completely changed my family forever, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If you've ever dealt with that one family member who gets away with everything, you'll want to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Trust me, the moment my parents finally saw through my sister's manipulation was pure justice that was years in the making. Now let's get into how my picture-perfect family imploded over a crashed car and decades of favoritism. Growing up in suburban Massachusetts, I always felt like I existed in Amber's shadow. From the moment she was born when I was 3, my parents treated her like she'd hung the moon and stars personally. Amber had this uncanny ability to charm everyone around her with her bubbly personality and picture-perfect smile. Our family photo albums were basically the Amber Show with me awkwardly positioned on the periphery. I still remember my 10th birthday when my parents promised me a special celebration. I'd invited my 3 best friends for a sleepover party. Nothing extravagant, just pizza and movies. That morning, Amber, then 7, decided she wanted to try gymnastics. Without a second thought, my mother canceled my birthday plans to take Amber to an impromptu gymnastics class, explaining to me, "We'll do your birthday next weekend, Zafira. Your sister really needs this opportunity." That pattern continued throughout our childhood. My academic achievements were acknowledged with brief nods, while Amber's C+ in math warranted celebratory ice cream. When I made the honor roll consistently throughout high school, my father merely patted my shoulder and said, "That's what we expect from you." When Amber managed to pull her grades up to B's, my parents threw her a surprise party and bought her a new phone. "You should be happy for your sister," my mother would reprimand whenever she caught my disappointed expression. "She struggles more than you do. Things come naturally to you, Zafira." The irony was that things didn't come naturally to me at all. I worked tirelessly, staying up late, studying while Amber floated through life on charm and excuses. I stopped expecting recognition around age 14 and instead channeled my energy into planning my escape college, as far away as possible, where I could finally exist as Zafira, not just Amber's less interesting sister. My parents, Richard and Eleanor Kingsley, weren't bad people. Dad was a respected hospital administrator, and Mom ran a successful interior design business. They provided well for us materially, but emotionally, their resources seemed unevenly distributed. They justified their favoritism with various explanations. Amber was more sensitive, needed extra support, or faced challenges that I couldn't understand. The pattern extended beyond our immediate family. At family gatherings, Amber would hold court with our relatives, receiving lavish compliments and attention, while I helped in the kitchen or sat quietly in the corner with a book. Even our grandmother, who I'd always felt a special connection with, would eventually be pulled into Amber's orbit, exclaiming over her newest accomplishments, while mine went unmentioned. By the time I graduated high school, I had perfected the art of emotional self-sufficiency. I applied to colleges without my parents' input, secured scholarships they knew nothing about, and planned a future that didn't depend on their approval. When my acceptance letter from Northwestern arrived, my mother's first response was, "But that's so far away. What if Amber needs you?" I left for college with a mixture of excitement and relief. Those 4 years were transformative. I made genuine friends who valued me, excelled academically without anyone comparing me to a sibling, and slowly rebuilt my self-worth. I majored in computer science, discovered a talent for software development, and secured an impressive internship that led to a job offer before graduation. Meanwhile, Amber floundered. She attended the local community college, dropped most of her classes, and cycled through retail jobs she couldn't keep. Each failure was met with my parents' unwavering support, financial bailouts, endless second chances, and constant reassurance that she was just finding her path. After graduation, I took a job with a tech company in Boston, close enough to visit occasionally, but far enough to maintain my independence. I lived frugally, saved aggressively, and focused on building my career. Every achievement felt like a quiet rebellion against years of being overlooked. At family gatherings, the dynamic remained unchanged. Amber, now in her mid-20s, still dominated conversations with dramatic stories about her latest job or relationship drama. My parents still rushed to solve her problems, while my promotions and accomplishments were acknowledged with distracted, "That's nice, dear" comments, before the conversation inevitably swung back to Amber. I had made peace with this reality. Or so I thought. What I didn't realize was that years of resentment had been building beneath my carefully constructed indifference. All it would take was one catalyst, one egregious display of favoritism for that dam to break. And that catalyst came in the form of a brand new Lexus and my sister's reckless entitlement. The day I purchased my car was one of profound satisfaction. After 3 years of saving countless overtime hours and meticulous financial planning, I had walked into the dealership and bought it outright. No loans, no co-signers, just the fruit of my hard work. The sleek black Lexus ES represented more than just a vehicle. To me, it was tangible proof that I had built something for myself, independent of my family's validation. The day that changed everything began like any other Sunday family dinner. It was early June, warm and fragrant, with the scent of blooming hydrangeas that lined my parents' driveway. I'd arrived early to help my mother prepare the meal, parking my 3-month-old Lexus carefully at the curb. The car still gave me a thrill every time I looked at it, a symbol of my independence and success that nobody could diminish. "Zafira, would you mind setting the table?" Mom called from the kitchen as I entered. "Your father's watching the game, and Amber just texted that she's running late. Something about an interview tomorrow she needs to prepare for." I nodded, swallowing the familiar irritation. Amber was always running late, which really meant she couldn't be bothered to respect anyone else's time. I arranged the plates and silverware with precision, a habit from my methodical nature that both my parents and sister often teased me about. Dad emerged from the living room, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "How's the new car treating you, kiddo?" "Still loving it. It's perfect," I replied, unable to keep the pride from my voice. "Best purchase I've ever made." "Well, you always were good with money," he said before adding the inevitable qualifier. "Your sister takes after your mother that way, more of a free spirit with finances." I bit my tongue. Amber wasn't a free spirit with finances. She was financially irresponsible and constantly enabled by our parents. At 26, she still had her cell phone on their family plan, lived in an apartment they subsidized, and regularly borrowed money that was never repaid. Dinner was nearly ready when the front door finally burst open and Amber swept in like a hurricane, all flowing blonde hair and dramatic gestures. "Sorry, I'm so late," she announced without a hint of genuine remorse. "You would not believe the day I've had. The interview prep is killing me, and then my car started making this weird noise, so I had to get an Uber." "What's wrong with your car?" Dad asked, immediately concerned. Amber shrugged. "Who knows? Probably something expensive." "It's always something expensive with that piece of junk." Her piece of junk was a perfectly serviceable Honda Civic that our parents had bought her 2 years ago. The fact that she rarely changed the oil or performed basic maintenance was apparently irrelevant. Throughout dinner, Amber dominated the conversation with tales of her upcoming interview at a boutique marketing firm, a job she was wildly underqualified for, but had secured an interview through one of Dad's golf buddies. My recent promotion to senior developer warranted only a passing mention before the topic returned to Amber's career prospects. As we finished dessert, Amber suddenly turned to me. Hey Zeph, can I borrow your car tomorrow? Just for the interview. I want to make a good impression, and showing up in a Lexus would definitely help. No, I replied instinctively, then softened my tone. I have meetings all day and I need my car. You could take the train for one day. She pushed her tone, taking on the wheedling quality that usually got her what she wanted from our parents. This interview is really important to me. I said no, Amber. I'm sorry about your car, but you can take an Uber to your interview too. My mother interjected, Zephyra, don't be selfish. Your sister has an opportunity here, and you know how unreliable rideshare can be. It's not selfish to say no to lending my brand new car, I countered, feeling my temperature rising. I worked hard for that car, and I'm not comfortable with anyone else driving it yet. It's just a car, Dad said dismissively. Family helps family. Amber would do the same for you. No, she absolutely wouldn't, I thought, but didn't say. Amber's expression had shifted to the injured look she'd perfected since childhood. I can't believe you won't help me with something this simple. It's like you want me to fail. That's not fair, I said firmly. I support you in plenty of ways, but my car is off limits. The tension hung heavy in the air as I helped clear the dishes. I could hear my parents in low conversation with Amber in the living room, no doubt commiserating about my selfishness. The familiar pattern made my chest tight. I was once again the villain in the family narrative, simply for establishing a reasonable boundary. When I left that night, I hugged my parents stiffly and told Amber good luck with her interview. The matter seemed settled, if uncomfortably. 3 days later, my phone rang while I was in a meeting. I ignored several calls from both Amber and my mother before I could finally step out to return them. Zephyra, my mother's voice, was tight with anger when I called back. There's been an accident. Amber took your car keys from your jacket while you were in the bathroom Sunday night. She's okay, but your car, it's totaled. The world seemed to tilt sideways. She did. What? She needed a reliable car for her interview, and you were being stubborn. She was going to return it before you even noticed, but there was an accident on Commonwealth Avenue. She swerved to avoid a dog and hit a tree. I wasn't processing my mother's words properly. Amber stole my car keys. She took my car without permission. That's not borrowing, Mom. That's theft. Don't be so dramatic, my mother snapped. She's your sister. It's not theft between family. Where is she now? And where's my car? The car's been towed to Richardson's auto body. Amber's at home resting. She's pretty shaken up. I'm going to see my car. Then I'm coming to talk to Amber. I hung up before she could respond and immediately left work, calling a rideshare to take me to the auto shop. The sight of my beautiful Lexus crumpled against a tow truck made my stomach drop. The entire front end was destroyed, the driver's side crushed in a way that made me realize how serious the accident had been. Insurance should cover it, the shop owner said sympathetically. Though with this level of damage, they'll likely total it. I nodded numbly and headed to my parents' house, where I knew I'd find Amber. The confrontation that awaited would change our family forever. When I arrived at my parents' house, I was shaking with a cocktail of emotions. I'd rarely allowed myself to feel rage, betrayal, and a strange cold determination. The house looked exactly as it always had, picture perfect with its manicured lawn and cheerful hanging baskets, a stark contrast to the turmoil I carried inside me. I didn't bother knocking. I used my key and walked straight in, finding Amber lounging on the living room sofa, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I entered, and I was stunned to see there wasn't a hint of remorse in her expression, just mild annoyance at being interrupted. "Oh, you're here," she said flatly. "Mom said you were freaking out." "Freaking out," I repeated incredulously. "You stole my car, crashed it, and you think I'm overreacting by being upset?" Amber rolled her eyes. "I borrowed it, and it wasn't my fault there was a dog in the road. Anyone would have swerved. You didn't borrow anything." I explicitly said no when you asked. Then you went behind my back and took my keys without permission. That's stealing, Amber. God, you're so dramatic, she sighed, sitting up. It's just a car. Insurance will cover it. Actually, insurance might not fully cover it, I countered, struggling to keep my voice level. I had only liability and collision, not comprehensive. And there's a deductible. Not to mention that the car was worth more than what insurance will pay out. For the first time, a flicker of concern crossed Amber's face, but it wasn't concern for me or what she'd done, it was self-concern. Well, I obviously can't pay for it. I'm between jobs right now. Of course you can't, I said bitterly. You never have to face consequences for anything, do you? My mother emerged from the kitchen, then her face pinched with displeasure. Zephyra, I can hear you from the other room. There's no need for this hostility. Accidents happen. This wasn't an accident, Mom. An accident is something unavoidable. Amber deliberately took my car after I said no. That was a choice. She needed a reliable car for her interview, Mom defended. She was trying to better herself. Isn't that what you're always saying she should do? I stared at her in disbelief. Are you seriously defending her right now? She stole my property and destroyed it. It's not stealing between sisters, my mother insisted, using the same infuriating logic she'd used on the phone. That's not how the law works, I shot back. And it's not how respect works either. My father emerged from his study drawn by the rising voices. What's all this shouting about? Zephyra is threatening to call the police on me. Amber immediately whined, her voice shifting to the wounded little girl tone that had always worked wonders on our father. I never said anything about the police. I clarified, though the thought had certainly crossed my mind. I'm simply pointing out that what Amber did was legally theft. Dad's expression darkened. Now listen here, young lady. We don't threaten family with the police. Whatever happened, we'll handle it ourselves. Handle it how I challenged. Are you going to make Amber take responsibility for once in her life? Or are you going to bail her out again and teach her that she can do whatever she wants without consequences? We'll help with the deductible, Dad offered, as if that resolved everything. It was an accident, Zephyra. You need to let this go. Let it go, I echoed, a hollow laugh escaping me. My car is totaled. The car I saved for 3 years to buy. The car that I paid for entirely on my own without asking for a dime from anyone. And you want me to just let it go because poor Amber needed to make a good impression? Yes, my mother said firmly. That's exactly what we expect you to do. Because you're the responsible one. The mature one. You've always been stronger than your sister. That's not strength, I said quietly. That's emotional manipulation. You're asking me to accept being wronged because it's easier than holding Amber accountable. You've always been so hard on your sister, Mom accused. She looks up to you, you know. She tries to live up to your example. No, she doesn't, I said, my voice steady now. She knows she doesn't have to try because you two will always clean up her messes. You've been doing it her entire life and you're doing it right now. Enough, Dad interjected. This conversation isn't productive. Zephyra, you need to calm down and remember that family forgives. Your sister made a mistake. She feels terrible about it. I looked at Amber, who was examining her manicure with a bored expression. She didn't look remotely terrible about anything. Does she? I asked pointedly. Amber glanced up suddenly, aware she was being observed, and quickly arranged her features into what she clearly thought was a remorseful expression. I am sorry, Zeph. I didn't mean to crash it. But you meant to take it without permission, I noted. After I explicitly said no. She shrugged, dropping the pretense of remorse. You'll forgive me. You always do, she said with a smirk, tossing her perfectly highlighted hair over her shoulder. Mom and Dad will make sure of it. The casual cruelty of her statement, the absolute certainty that she would face no real consequences for her actions, cracked something fundamental inside me. It was as if a lifetime of swallowed resentment suddenly had a voice. "Not this time," I said quietly. "This time is different." "What's that supposed to mean?" my father demanded. "It means I'm done," I replied, surprising myself with how calm I felt. "I'm done being the responsible one who has to forgive and forget every time Amber decides her wants are more important than my boundaries. I'm done being the emotional punching bag for this family." "Don't be ridiculous," my mother scoffed. "You're overreacting." "No, I'm finally reacting appropriately," I countered. "I'm going to file a police report about my stolen car. I'm going to file an insurance claim and name Amber as the unauthorized driver who took the vehicle without permission. And then I'm going to step back from this family dynamic until some things change." Amber's smug expression faltered. "You wouldn't dare. Watch me," I said, turning to leave. My father moved to block the door. "If you do this, you'll regret it. Family stands by family, Zephra. Always." I looked him directly in the eyes. "That principle seems to only apply when it benefits Amber. But you're right about one thing. Family should stand by family. You two have never stood by me, not when it mattered." "That's not true," my mother protested. "We've always been there for you." "No," I said sadly. "You've always been there for Amber." I was just expected to fend for myself because I was the strong one, the responsible one, the mature one. Those weren't compliments, Mom. They were excuses to hold me to a higher standard while letting Amber get away with everything. I gently moved past my father and walked out the door, ignoring their calls behind me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't backing down to keep the peace. For the first time, I was choosing my own well-being over Amber's comfort, and it felt like finally being able to breathe. The next 2 weeks were a blur of insurance claims, police reports, and deafening silence from my family. I had filed a report documenting the unauthorized use of my vehicle, provided the insurance company with all the necessary information, and blocked my parents' and Amber's numbers after a barrage of angry, manipulative messages. "You're tearing this family apart over a car," my mother had texted before I blocked her. "I can't believe you'd choose material possessions over your own sister," came from my father. Amber's messages had quickly devolved from fake apologies to outright threats. "You'll regret this. No one will side with you over me. They never have." That last message had stayed with me, not because it hurt, but because of its raw truth. No one in our family had ever taken my side against Amber. The realization was both painful and liberating. I wasn't imagining the favoritism. It was so entrenched that even Amber recognized and weaponized it. I took a week off work to deal with the logistical fallout of the accident and to give myself space to process the emotional earthquake that had upended my life. My apartment became my sanctuary, a place where no one could gaslight me or minimize my feelings. Friends checked in, offering support and, more importantly, validation that I wasn't overreacting. "I've watched this dynamic play out for years," my best friend Mia said over coffee in my kitchen. "Honestly, I'm proud of you for finally standing up for yourself." "I feel guilty," I admitted. "Like I'm the one who broke the family." "The family was already broken, Zeph," she replied gently. "You're just the first one to stop pretending it wasn't." 10 days after the confrontation, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Miss Kingsley, this is Detective Rivera from the Boston Police Department. I'm calling about the report you filed regarding your vehicle." My stomach tightened. "Yes, what about it? We've completed our investigation and found some additional information that might interest you. Your sister's blood alcohol level was over the legal limit at the time of the accident." I sank onto my couch, stunned. "She was drunk." "Yes, ma'am. And there's more. The accident wasn't caused by swerving to avoid a dog as she initially claimed. Traffic camera footage shows her texting while driving, then losing control of the vehicle. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not only had Amber stolen my car, but she'd been driving it drunk and distracted, then lied about the cause of the accident. The potential consequences could have been far worse than a totaled car. She could have killed someone or herself. We'll be pressing charges for driving under the influence, reckless endangerment, and filing a false police report, the detective continued. Given the vehicle theft aspect, we wanted to check if you're still interested in pursuing those charges as well. I hesitated, conflicting emotions warring within me. Despite everything, some residual protective instinct toward my sister flickered. But then I remembered her smirk, her absolute certainty that she would face no consequences, and the decades of enabled behavior that had led to this moment. Yes, I said firmly. I want to pursue those charges. After hanging up, I sat in the stillness of my apartment trying to process this new information. I hadn't wanted things to escalate to criminal charges, but Amber's recklessness had forced that outcome. The realization that she could have killed someone while driving my car sent chills down my spine. Later that afternoon, there was an unexpected knock at my door. I peered through the peephole, surprised to see my father standing in the hallway. He looked haggard, the lines in his face deeper than I remembered. I hesitated, then opened the door but didn't invite him in. "The police called us," he said without preamble. "About Amber." I nodded, waiting. "She was drunk and texting." For the first time in my memory, my father looked genuinely shocked by something Amber had done. "She told us she swerved for a dog." "She lied," I said simply. "She does that a lot, Dad. You and Mom just choose not to see it." He ran a hand through his graying hair. "Can I come in, please?" I stepped aside, reluctantly allowing him into my space, but maintaining emotional distance. He sat heavily on my couch, looking around at the apartment he'd visited only a handful of times in the 3 years I'd lived there. "Your mother doesn't know I'm here," he admitted. She still thinks this is somehow your fault for not being more understanding." "And what do you think, Dad?" I asked, genuinely curious if anything had shifted in his perspective. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. "I think I've failed you both, but in different ways. I failed Amber by never setting boundaries. I failed you by expecting you to be the adult in the relationship with your sister, even when you were just a child yourself." His unexpected self-awareness caught me off guard. "Why now, Dad? What's different this time?" "The drinking and driving," he said quietly. "That crossed a line I can't ignore. But also, when the police called, they mentioned how cooperative you've been, how mature in handling everything. The officer said something that hit me hard. He said, 'Your older daughter is one of the most level-headed victims I've dealt with. You must be proud.'" He looked up, eyes shining with unshed tears. "And I realized I've never told you I was proud. Not the way you deserve to hear it. I've taken your strength for granted, Zephra. I've used it as an excuse to pour all my parental energy into Amber." I felt a lump forming in my throat, but stayed silent, unwilling to make this easier for him. "The police are saying she could face jail time," he continued. "Your mother wants us to hire the best lawyer, drain our retirement if necessary. But I'm not sure that's the right answer anymore. I'm not sure we'd be helping her by shielding her from consequences again." "What are you saying, Dad?" "I'm saying maybe you were right. Maybe it's time Amber faced reality. And maybe it's time your mother and I did too." I sat down across from him, processing his words. "This isn't just about the car, you know. It never was. It's about a lifetime of being overlooked and undervalued while watching Amber be coddled and excused." "I know," he said, surprising me again. "I see that now. Or I'm starting to." We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of decades of family dynamics hanging between us. Finally, I spoke. I can't fix this for you, Dad. I can't tell you how to handle Amber or Mom. I can only set boundaries for myself. He nodded slowly. That's fair. More than fair, given everything. I hope someday you'll be willing to have a relationship with me again. A better one than before. Maybe, I said honestly. But things need to change first. Real change, not just promises during a crisis. As he rose to leave, he paused at the door. The insurance company called. They're totaling the car. The check should be coming soon. I know. They called me too. Your mother and I want to help. With replacing the car? I shook my head firmly. No, I'll handle it myself, just like I did the first time. He looked like he wanted to argue, but instead just nodded. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for, Zephyra. I'm sorry it took something like this for me to see it. After he left, I stood by the window, watching as he walked to his car, shoulders hunched like a man carrying a heavy burden. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to run after him and smooth things over. I didn't feel responsible for managing the family's emotional landscape. I felt only the quiet certainty that I had finally done the right thing for myself, regardless of what came next. Have you ever had to draw a hard boundary with family that changed everything? Let me know in the comments. And if you're finding this story of family justice relatable, hit that subscribe button and notification bell. The next part reveals how my sister's perfect facade completely crumbled when consequences finally caught up with her. The Massachusetts judicial system moves with deliberate slowness, a fact I came to appreciate as July faded into August. The impending legal proceedings against Amber hung over our fractured family like a thundercloud, distant rumbles promising a storm but never quite breaking. I returned to work focusing on the comforting logic of code and the tangible progress of my projects. Without the emotional drain of managing my family's dynamics, I found new energy for my career. I took on challenging assignments, volunteered for a mentorship program, and even began exploring opportunities for advancement that I'd previously been too emotionally exhausted to consider. My insurance eventually paid out for the Lexus, though. As I'd predicted, the amount was less than what I'd paid for it. I used the money as a down payment on a new vehicle, adjusting my budget to accommodate the unexpected car payment. It was a setback, but a manageable one. Another reminder that I had built a life sturdy enough to withstand these challenges. 3 weeks after my conversation with my father, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. It's Mom. Please don't block this number. We need to talk about Amber's court date next week. I stared at the message, weighing my options. Part of me wanted to maintain the wall of silence, but a more pragmatic part recognized that I would eventually have to face my family again, if only in the courtroom. Better to be prepared. What about it? I texted back. She's terrified. The lawyer says she could face jail time because of the DUI and the false report. Please drop the theft charges. She's your sister. The familiar appeal to family loyalty made me clench my jaw. Some things hadn't changed. I'm not dropping the charges, I replied. The theft isn't an allegation, it's a fact. She took my car without permission after I explicitly said no. The prosecutor is using your testimony to paint her as irresponsible and entitled. It's making everything worse. I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped me. The irony was too much. Amber was being painted as irresponsible and entitled because she was irresponsible and entitled, traits my parents had carefully cultivated in her. I'm simply telling the truth, I texted back. I'm not embellishing or exaggerating. If the truth makes her look bad, that's not my problem to fix. There was a long pause before her next message appeared. Your father and I are separating. I thought you should hear it from me. The abrupt change of subject caught me off guard. I stared at the screen, trying to process this new information. My parents had been married for 35 years. Despite their flaws as parents, they'd always seemed solid as a couple. What happened? I finally texted curiosity, overcoming my resolve to remain detached. We disagree about how to handle this situation with Amber. He thinks we need to let her face consequences. I think family protects family no matter what. The simplicity of her explanation belied what must have been seismic arguments behind closed doors. I tried to imagine my father, who had always deferred to my mother's parenting decisions, finally taking a stand, and I felt a reluctant flicker of respect for him. "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied, unsure what else to say. "Are you?" Her response came quickly tinged with bitterness. "You've destroyed this family, Zephyra. I hope you're satisfied." My momentary sympathy evaporated. "I didn't destroy anything, Mom. I just stopped pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Amber made her choices, and now there are consequences. That's how the world works for everyone else." She didn't respond, and I didn't push. Some chasms were too wide to bridge with text messages. The day of Amber's preliminary hearing arrived with somber gray skies and a persistent drizzle that matched my mood. I'd been subpoenaed to testify, so my presence wasn't optional. I dressed conservatively in a charcoal pantsuit and arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early, hoping to collect my thoughts before the proceedings. I spotted my father in the lobby, standing alone by a window. He looked older somehow, the weeks of stress etched into the lines around his eyes. He nodded when he saw me, but didn't approach, respecting the distance I'd established. My mother arrived 10 minutes later with Amber in tow. My sister looked nothing like the confident, entitled woman who had smirked at me in our parents' living room. Her hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail, her face devoid of makeup, her demeanor subdued. She wore a conservative navy dress that I'd never seen before, clearly chosen to project responsibility and contrition to the judge. Our eyes met briefly across the lobby. I expected to see anger or accusation in her gaze, but instead I saw something unfamiliar: fear. For the first time in her life, Amber was facing consequences she couldn't charm or manipulate her way out of, and she was terrified. A small vindictive part of me felt satisfaction at her fear. The larger part felt only a deep sadness for the person she'd been allowed to become. The hearing itself was brief and procedural. Amber's lawyer, an expensive-looking man in a bespoke suit, entered a not guilty plea while simultaneously indicating that they were in negotiations with the prosecutor for a potential plea deal. I was called to testify about the circumstances surrounding the unauthorized taking of my vehicle. I stated the facts plainly: that Amber had asked to borrow the car. I had explicitly refused, and she had taken my keys without permission while I was visiting our parents' home. The prosecutor asked about our history, and I carefully avoided any editorializing about our childhood, sticking strictly to relevant facts. When I stepped down from the witness stand, I glanced at my parents. My father sat with his head bowed, hands clasped tightly in front of him. My mother glared at me, her expression a mixture of betrayal and disbelief, as if she still couldn't comprehend that I wasn't protecting Amber. The judge set a trial date for the following month if no plea deal was reached, and released Amber on her own recognizance, with strict instructions not to leave the state or drive any vehicle. As we filed out of the courtroom, my mother brushed past me without a word, her arm protectively around Amber's shoulders. My father lingered, uncertainty written across his face. "You did what you had to do in there," he said quietly. "I want you to know that I understand that now." I nodded, unsure if I was ready to accept his olive branch, but acknowledging his effort. "This isn't about punishing Amber. It's about truth and consequences." "I know," he replied. "I just wish I'd understood the difference sooner." September arrived with a tentative sense of rebirth. The insurance check for my car had cleared, allowing me to purchase a more modest but reliable replacement. I'd settled into a new rhythm at work, one that included more assertiveness about my contributions. and less willingness to let others take credit for my efforts. The changes in my family situation had catalyzed a broader transformation in how I navigated the world. I hadn't spoken to my mother since the preliminary hearing, though. My father called occasionally with brief, awkward updates. He and my mother were still separated, living in different parts of the house, but maintaining a civil coexistence for appearance's sake. Amber had moved back home temporarily while awaiting her trial, her apartment lease having expired, and her financial situation too precarious to secure a new place. The prosecutors had offered Amber a plea deal, guilty pleas to unauthorized use of a vehicle driving under the influence, and filing a false police report in exchange for a suspended sentence, probation, community service, mandatory alcohol, counseling, and restitution. The alternative was to go to trial and risk jail time if convicted on all charges. Her lawyers strongly recommended taking the deal, my father informed me during one of our calls. But your mother and Amber are still holding out hope for a dismissal or a better offer. I wasn't surprised. The idea of Amber having a criminal record, even for reduced charges, was anathema to my mother's vision of her golden child. That's not realistic, I said. The evidence is clear-cut. She should take the deal. I agree, he said, surprising me again with his newfound backbone. I've told them as much, but they're not listening to me. 2 weeks before the scheduled trial date, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment. I opened the door to find Amber standing in the hallway, looking nothing like either the smug sister who had crashed my car or the frightened defendant from the courthouse. She was simply tired. No makeup, hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing jeans and a plain sweater instead of her usual carefully curated outfits. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual demanding edge. I hesitated, then stepped aside to let her enter. She walked into my living room and stood awkwardly, as if unsure of her welcome. "Mom doesn't know I'm here," she said. "She'd be furious if she found out." "Why are you here, Amber?" She took a deep breath. "I'm taking the plea deal. I wanted you to hear it from me." I blinked in surprise. "What changed your mind? Reality, I guess," she said with a hollow laugh. My lawyer laid out exactly what would happen if we went to trial. "The evidence is overwhelming. The security footage from our parents' street showing me taking your car, the traffic camera showing me texting the blood alcohol test." He said I'd be lucky not to serve time. I nodded, unsure what response she was looking for. "Mom still thinks I should fight it," she continued. "She's convinced the judge will be lenient because I'm, quote, a good girl from a good family." Amber's voice took on a bitter edge. "She doesn't get it. Nobody cares about that anymore. Actions have consequences." The phrase "one" I'd repeated often during our confrontation sounded strange coming from her lips. "When did you figure that out?" I asked cautiously. Amber sank onto my couch, suddenly looking exhausted. "Honestly, when Dad stopped enabling me. When he moved out of their bedroom and told me he wasn't paying for my lawyer. When he said—" She paused, swallowing hard. "When he said he loved me too much to keep protecting me from myself." I sat down opposite her, processing this information. "So Dad's really changed his approach, completely. He told me he's been doing me a disservice my whole life, and that he wasn't going to compound that mistake by continuing to shield me from consequences." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "He said he wanted to be a better father to both his daughters." The sentiment was so unexpected that I felt my throat tighten with emotion. "I've been terrible to you, Amber," continued her voice, barely above a whisper. "Not just with the car, all our lives. I knew Mom and Dad treated us differently, and I used it to my advantage. I've been selfish and entitled, and I'm sorry, Zephra. I'm really, really sorry." I studied her face, looking for signs of the manipulation I'd grown so accustomed to detecting. But all I saw was raw, painful sincerity, the expression of someone finally seeing themselves clearly for the first time and not liking what they discovered. I don't expect you to forgive me, she added quickly. I wouldn't in your position. I just wanted you to know that I'm taking responsibility for everything. I was silent for a long moment, processing her words. Thank you for telling me, I finally said, not quite ready to offer forgiveness, but acknowledging her effort. Amber nodded, accepting my reserved response. There's something else. After this is all over, after I've fulfilled whatever terms the court sets, I'm moving. Starting over somewhere new. Where, I'm not sure yet. Somewhere I can build a life based on my own efforts, not mom and dad's support or connections. Somewhere I can prove to myself that I'm capable of being a decent human being. The determination in her voice was something I'd never heard before, a steely resolve that reminded me unexpectedly of myself. I think that's a good idea, I said honestly. We talked for another hour, more openly than we ever had before. There were no dramatic reconciliations or tearful embraces. Too much damage had been done for that kind of Hollywood ending. But there was something else, something tentative and fragile, the beginning of mutual respect. When she left, I felt strangely hollow, as if I'd been carrying the weight of our dysfunctional relationship for so long that its absence left me unbalanced. I wasn't ready to trust Amber's transformation completely. Time would tell if it was genuine or merely a response to her legal troubles. But for the first time, I allowed myself to hope that real change was possible. The plea hearing took place on a crisp October morning. I attended at my father's request, sitting beside him in the back of the courtroom, while my mother sat alone in the front row. Amber stood before the judge, answering his questions clearly and accepting responsibility for her actions. When asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, she spoke without notes, her voice steady. What I did was wrong on every level. I betrayed my sister's trust, endangered myself and others by driving under the influence, and then lied to cover my actions. I've spent my life expecting special treatment and avoiding consequences, and that ends today. I accept full responsibility and am prepared to face whatever penalties the court deems appropriate. The judge sentenced her, according to the plea agreement, 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory alcohol counseling, a suspended driver's license for 1 year, and full restitution to me for the difference between my insurance payout and the actual value of my car. As we left the courthouse, I saw Amber standing alone on the steps, my mother having stormed off after the sentencing. My father hesitated, looking between Amber and me with uncertainty. Go to her, I said gently. She needs support right now. He squeezed my hand gratefully and went to join Amber. I watched them from a distance, my father's arm around my sister's shoulders, her head bowed but her posture somehow stronger than before. They were both changing painfully, but genuinely, and for the first time in my life, I felt hope for our family's future. Not a perfect future, not one that erased the hurts of the past, but perhaps one where truth mattered more than appearances, where accountability replaced entitlement, and where each of us could finally be seen for who we really were: flawed, complex, and worthy of respect. As I turned to leave, I caught my sister's eye across the distance. She gave me a small, uncertain smile. Not asking for anything, not expecting forgiveness, just acknowledging that we had both survived the storm. I nodded in return, a silent recognition that while our relationship might never be what society expected of sisters, it could perhaps become something honest and real. And for now, that was enough. 2 months later, as Amber stood sobbing in the courthouse parking lot, abandoned by our mother for the first time in her life, I realized some family ties are meant to be severed, while others can be rewoven into something stronger. My sister and I will never have the relationship portrayed in heartwarming movies, but we've found something more valuable: authentic respect built on honesty rather than obligation. And my father at 63 discovered it's never too late to become the parent your child needs instead of the enabler they don't. Did this story resonate with you? Have you experienced family karma or had to stand up for yourself when nobody else would? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you found value in my journey from doormat to self-respect, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who might need permission to set healthy boundaries. Thank you for joining me today. Remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to hold them accountable. Until next time.